Hello, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live. My name is Sarah. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be your moderator today for this Ask a Scientist all about animals. If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, thank you so much for watching, but we can't grab your questions or comments from there right now. If you are on Zoom, you can ask a question by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you would like a shout out, if we end up asking your question, you can leave your name and age. If you would like to see captions today, you can press the CC button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Captions. So now I would like to introduce my educators that will be talking all about animals today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Becca. My pronouns are she and her. And my favorite groups of animals to talk about are dinosaurs and reptiles.
Hey everybody, so glad that you're here today. My name is Karen, and I have so many favorite animals to talk about, but I think some of my most favorite are amphibians, like this guy behind me, and birds like owls.
And hi everyone, my name is Megan. I use the pronoun she, hers. And as far as my favorite animals to talk about, I really love talking about mammals and especially flying mammals like bats.
All right, well, our first question is from Kai, and the question is, how many animals are considered living fossils?
That's a great question, and I'm going to kind of interpret it in a very specific way because it can be interpreted a few different ways. I'm going to interpret it that a living fossil would be something that was around during times of animals that we now have some fossils from, let's say dinosaurs, for example. And there are quite a few different living fossils out there. There's a lot of animals that actually were around during the time of the dinosaurs as late as a couple 100 million years ago, maybe 200 million years ago, that are still around today. In fact, some reptiles, including some crocodiles and alligators, were most definitely around for at least 100 million years, probably quite a bit longer, and they haven't really changed all that much. There also are some fish and even some shark species that have been around for a very, very long time. Also, even some invertebrates like cockroaches and a few other
jellyfish.
Yes, and also some of them have been around for a very long time. So there's quite a few animals out there that could be considered living fossils. And there's probably more than I could even name right here, but those are just a few examples.
All right, Prisha, age 8, asks, do snakes have ears? And if so, why?
That's an awesome question. Snakes have ear bones, but they do not have ear openings, just like we do. We have ear openings, and that allows for sounds to come in. Snakes do not have ear openings. They have scales that completely cover over their ear bones. However, they don't need ear openings because snakes don't have legs. They don't actually ever get very far off of the ground. And the purpose of ear openings is to get vibrations in the air to our ears so that we can hear. That's basically what we hear. We hear vibrations. Snakes don't need to be in the air, so they feel those vibrations on the ground with all of their body, including their ear bones. So wow, my little lizard friend behind me here does in fact have ear openings. Snakes, they don't.
All right, Nayan, age 10, wants to know, how can a 10-year-old help to save animals from extinction?
There's so many ways that a 10-year-old can help save animals from extinction. And thank you for asking that question. I think immediately of citizen science. So citizen science is when there's real science projects that are happening, being run by real scientists, and they need your help. So they create these projects that make it so that you can go out into your community and you have the resources and the tools that you need to help gather research for them so that they can get a ton of research from all over the world to help them answer some of these really important questions about these species. One I think of in particular is called Frog Watch, which a lot of different zoos and aquariums will train young people on these sort of looking out for amphibians, especially frogs. And you go out in early spring, which is just around the corner, and you listen out for certain different species that might be calling, and you mark down where you hear them. And that will help scientists better understand when those species are around, when they're starting to wake up, and whether any of them are starting to disappear.
And I'll just add to that, the fact you're asking the question, you've taken the first step. The fact that you are aware that there are animals that are nearing extinction or have gone extinct within our lifetimes, the fact that you care, you ask the questions, talk to other people about it. When you learn about things like the Amphibian Watch or the Honeybee Project, it's another great citizen science project that you could look into, sort of encourage others to learn more about it, because it is pretty clear that humans are increasing the rate of other animal extinctions here on the planet Earth, and there's lots that can be done. Just starting by learning and asking the questions is a great place.
Right, so we have a question about bird migration. So this question asks, a newly fledged swift immediately starts its migration thousands of miles, leaving its parents behind. Can this amazing navigational journey truly only be genetically driven?
A good question. There's a lot, from my understanding. I am by no ways an expert on bird migration. A lot of it has to do with like the magnetic field of the Earth, changing daylight hours. I don't know in the case of swifts if they like follow their parents. So in that case, it is also a learned behavior. If you think about other animal migrations, that it has to have some root in genetics is something like the monarch butterfly. Monarch butterflies migrate, north to south all the way across North America, including Mexico. And it's not all one generation. So it's sort of like monarch might leave Mexico, fly to Texas, lay their eggs, those caterpillars hatch out, they grow up, go through metamorphosis, and then they continue the journey northward. So there has to be something more than just that instinct, like it probably is genetic, but there is a lot of evidence around the magnetic field of the Earth helping these animals with migrations. I don't know if Megan or Becca have anything extra to add.
I would just say environmental conditions are really good indicators too. So not just those invisible things like the magnetic field, but also just the environmental conditions of whether it's warm or cold or dry. That's going to drive an animal to make a certain decision too.
All right, Aria, age 5, wants to know, where do frogs live?
Lots of places. So amphibians sort of are spread across, I want to say, all the continents except for Antarctica, unless they happen to be in some sort of research station down there. They typically live in damp environments, or at least near damp environments. So something like this frog that's in the picture behind me probably lives in the water. He has pretty smooth skin. He probably needs to be near that water source day in and day out, although could move on land as well. For other types of frogs, sort of a subcategory called toads, they tend to be more terrestrial or dry tolerant. So they can live maybe in a forest. They do need to have a stream or a pond or something nearby in order to lay their eggs, because one of the things about most amphibians is that they start their life in a water source, whether it be a pond or a pool, or even the cup inside of a flower, just a little bit of water. So amphibians have so many amazing adaptations that allow them to live across the world, in trees, down in the ground, in all sorts of different ecosystems. They are fascinating animals to study.
Also just cute.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at this guy's like big giant eyes. He's so cute.
Maya, age 7, wants to know, what was the first dinosaur?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's no great answer to that question, because scientists aren't entirely sure what the very, very, very first dinosaur was. We know ancestors of dinosaurs. We know that reptiles and dinosaurs had a common ancestor, but when it actually started out as this is a dinosaur, as opposed to this is some type of proto-dinosaur or some type of reptile, that's a little bit unclear. There are a few dinosaurs that scientists believe may be dinosaurs, and they were about 230 million years old. So that's pretty old. That's probably the far upper limit of dinosaur age or dinosaur time frame. But there is a dinosaur that we know is a dinosaur called Coelophysis, and it actually walked around here in Massachusetts many, many, many millions of years ago. And it was believed to have lived starting about 220 million years ago. So that's one that we know is a dinosaur. It may not be the oldest, but it's one of the oldest, and the one that we know for sure was a dinosaur.
Hard because we didn't live 200 plus million years ago, and we have to rely on those fossils that got left behind. And there are some animals that don't fossilize well. We don't know too much about amphibians' history or prehistory, mainly because they're really soft and squishy and they don't fossilize great. So there might be dinosaurs, as Becca says, that actually existed prior to that one, but we just haven't found them in the fossil record yet. And who knows? Anybody out there today might be the ones that go out and discover that.
I certainly would like to discover some dinosaurs.
Well, you need to start digging then, Becca.
Gotta get to work.
All right, this question may have been inspired by Megan's background. Why do leopards and jaguars have spots?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was thinking like my background. I was like, how do you know? But my background. Yeah, so was it leopards and jaguars? They have spots to help them camouflage. That's why a lot of animals will have certain coloration or certain patterns on their skin. So it helps them hide into the environment that they live in. Usually there's sort of two reasons for that. One, to hide from another animal that might try and make a meal of you. You want to stay nice and hidden and still, as well as you might want to hide as a predator, which often those big cats almost solely are. They're hiding in order to get close to their food source. So they want to really be hidden and sneak up until they really go and try and get that meal.
Great. Scarlett, age 11, wants to know, how do tardigrades survive in space? And maybe we can talk about what a tardigrade is.
Oh, how did Scarlett know that she got three of the most excitable people when it comes to tardigrades? I'll start with sort of what tardigrades are. They're teeny tiny, microscopic animals. I don't remember which group they fall into, but they are everywhere. So we've taken, not we personally, scientists have taken samples from a whole variety of different ecosystems, and tardigrades live there, often in mosses or in the water, but they can survive just about anything, including, it turns out, the temperatures, the lack of air, and the pressure of outer space. I don't know if Megan or Becca want to talk more about the tardigrades in space. I don't want to hog them.
I just know that they go into this is it called a ton or a tune or
yeah, I was gonna say it starts with a T. That sounds right.
And it's sort of like what I think of more like a little pod, like they kind of squish on down and they
dehydrate
down. Yeah, they just go into a very dormant period where they don't need food, they don't need water, they're in an extreme environment, and the way that they're going to handle that is by turning basically into a speck and kind of not living for a long time, and yet they are still living. And then once they get rehydrated and are in a less extreme environment, they'll start to be more active and come back to life. But I'm just thinking of you, if you haven't seen a picture of them in that little dormant state, it's almost like they're a little, someone let their air out, like they're deflated, like a little deflated balloon.
It looks like a raisin.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like when they're alive and well, they're a grape, and when they're in maybe a more extreme environment, they're like a raisin.
All right, well, I have been seeing this question a lot on a lot of different places. People seem to be confused about what exactly is hibernation. Do animals fully sleep through the winter? And what animals do hibernate?
I can start us off here a little bit because I did work with bears for a short spell of time, which often people associate hibernation with bears. There's this big question of true hibernation, is something truly fully asleep during that whole time? And with bears, one thing I'm remembering is that they're not really truly in this very deep sleep. you'll
They're not
often
true hibernators.
Right, they're not true hibernators. One thing that they do during that really dormant period is that their brain will actually like sort of send electrical pulses through their body to make it so they contract and keep their muscles strong so that they don't completely lose. You know, think of it, it's a long time to not move. So their brain is sending those electrical pulses to try and keep them a little bit agile and still ready to wake up and be able to move around and protect their babies or their family or themselves. So no, when we talk about hibernation, it's not always true hibernation. It's sort of more just like this very dormant period where they're not very active and they're not eating a ton. But I don't know, Karen and Becca, if you want to talk about some other examples.
Yeah, one of the few animals, at least locally, that are true hibernators are woodchucks. And if you are a true hibernator, it's one of those things where like nothing is going to bring you out of your hibernation. Their heart rate gets to like a couple times a minute. Their breath is like once a minute. Their body temperature goes way low. And this is why, especially for you gardeners out there in the summer, early fall, while your garden is flourishing, and if you have a local woodchuck, they are eating and eating and eating and eating and eating because they need to build up all of this body fat to survive the winters when they go into that true hibernation. And it's only for mammals. There are no true hibernators that are in any other group. There are a lot of animals that might go through torpor. If anybody has like pet turtles, sometimes they go through that cycle where they're a lot slower, they don't need to eat as much, and that's considered a torpor. There are also types of mammals that go through a torpor and not a true hibernation. So it is a very specific scientific definition, and very few animals actually fit that true hibernating category. But I got distracted on that question because I was looking up a picture of a tardigrade. So I need to share that. Can you guys all see the tardigrade?
Oh,
Yeah.
And this is a super high powered microscope. I wish it said on here. Yeah, it doesn't tell me what its magnification is, but they're real cool animals. I highly encourage you guys to get out and learn more about tardigrades.
right.
All right, Aria, age 5, wants to know, why are some dinosaurs so big? And Elizabeth, age 9, wants to know, what is the biggest dinosaur?
So the sauropods, or the long-necked dinosaurs, were most definitely the biggest of all of the dinosaurs. They could be really huge, up to 180 tons, which is incredibly heavy. Their necks themselves could be up to 49 feet long. So these guys were massive. And why did they get to be so big? Well, that kind of has a little bit to do with the environment that they were in. During the time of the dinosaurs, mammals were not really doing much. They were pretty small, pretty generalized, not really as diverse as mammals are now. And there were certainly some reptiles, but the dinosaurs were kind of like kings of the castle at this point. They were able to take over every single ecological niche. And so some dinosaurs were able to find enough food. The environment was more tropical just based on where the continents were on our planet. As they've moved since, it's been a little bit more diverse in the amount of environments. But dinosaurs were able to get a lot of food. They were able to kind of just take over. And so they were able to grow so large because there weren't really predators that were trying to go for the long-necked dinosaurs. I'm sure some did, but it was probably pretty difficult to take down a long neck if you're just one little T-Rex compared to the long-necked dinosaur. And so they were just able to grow really big by having all of the resources they needed. And we don't have an environment today where animals would necessarily be able to get that big, because we have our continent sort of shifted across the whole globe. We don't have one space that's kind of big enough to have as much food resources. We have an extreme diversity in the amount of animals that we have, and lots of pretty big top predators that would stop many animals from getting that big at this point in Earth's history.
Now, I don't know if it's true for sort of the era of dinosaurs, Becca, but I know in sort of ancient Earth, we also had very different levels of our atmosphere, how much oxygen versus carbon dioxide versus methane versus all those things. For instance, there were dragonflies, so invertebrate insects, dragonflies like you would see down by the local pond today, that had wingspans of 5 or 6 feet. So their wingspan was as wide as I am tall, pretty much. which is insane. And that had to do that there was much greater concentration of oxygen at the time in our atmosphere, allowing these animals to thrive and grow that big, and a lot less biodiversity, as Becca pointed out. When you don't have as many different types of animals competing for similar resources, that's also what allows giganticism, much like, 20,000 years ago when we had the megafauna, like lots of giant mammals like woolly mammoth, giant sloths, giant ground bears. I kind of think of some of the other, they were mostly mammals. We call it the era of the rise of the mammals.
After the downfall.
After the death of the dinosaurs, or most of the dinosaurs.
Not all.
Not all.
All right, well, jumping off that, what is the biggest animal currently or right now?
Ooh, I have that one. The biggest animal currently, and I think ever on planet Earth, is the blue whale. It is enormous. So it lives in our ocean, and it is 400,000 pounds and almost 100 feet long, and also creates the world's largest poop too, in case you're wondering. That it's a fun fact I always love to throw out there, is that it makes sense that the world's largest animal also makes the world's largest poop. That is like, I forget how many tons that was, but I think it was like an equivalent of like 10 feet long, which is pretty impressive.
2 tons, isn't it? Like something insane?
It is insane. Yes, it is a large animal. And it's cool that it's just kind of out in our ocean.
It's I find it so cool that is the largest animal. It's vertebrate. Now I'm second guessing myself. I think it's the largest animal to ever exist on the planet Earth. And it exists in our time here as humans on the planet, which is so cool.
All right, so someone really wants to know about frogs. So what do frogs do in a day? How many types of frogs are there? What do frogs eat? So really just tell us what you know about frogs.
What I know about frogs. I'll take that one since I said I love amphibians, but Megan or Becca, please feel free to add on. There are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of species of amphibian worldwide. The majority of them are frogs. So we kind of have 3 main categories: frogs, which also includes toads, salamanders, and then this lesser known group called caecilians, which are really cool amphibians. I highly encourage you to look those guys up too. I don't even know that I can generalize what frogs do in a day or where they live or what they eat. I would say, for the most part, I don't love to use the word all, but again, probably with some exceptions in those thousands of species, all adult amphibians are carnivorous. So they eat other animals. Sometimes they're early life stages, like their larval or tadpole stage. They probably do eat plants. Once they are adults, most of them eat other animals. Yeah, there's such diversity, as I was saying. Like some of the real cool stories, like if you don't have a solid water source to lay their eggs and raise their tadpoles, there's a frog called, I think it's the Darwin frog, where the male, so the father, keeps the eggs in a pouch underneath his mouth with water in it. The eggs hatch out and the tadpoles grow up in there, and then he spits them out. That's one real cool, weird example. Another one is a Suriname toad, where the mother has all these holes on her back and she keeps the eggs inside of these little pockets. The babies hatch out in those pockets, swim around, and go through their metamorphosis in her back and then start popping out. I always picture, for those of you that played the game, Pop-O-Matic Perfection, where you had all those little shapes that you had to take out or put in before everything exploded on you. So yeah, there's no way to generalize frogs, but there's just so much to know and learn about all these different species.
All right, for our last question, I'm going to ask you all that spring is finally in the air, is very warm. So what's your favorite animal that is here in New England that you love watching starting to come out in the spring or summer, or what's your favorite animal?
Go Becca.
I was gonna say, I know right away, so I can go first. My favorite animal of all time is a snake. And so Megan questions me on that. I love snakes. I love to go on hikes and sort of listen for the rustle of the leaves. If you're really quiet, you can often hear sort of the way that they move through the leaves is different than any other animal. And I've picked up on that pretty well over the past several years. So every time I go on a hike, it's my goal to see a snake. And I love watching the little garter snakes or even water snakes, or we've got quite a few native snakes here in New England, and it's pretty fun to see them in the wild, kind of doing their normal snake thing. So I really am excited about them.
I don't know that I can pick a favorite, but I will say last spring, since I was spending a lot more time just hanging out at my house, I sat in my backyard a lot and I watched the baby robins. So the bird, robin, and this one mama bird had like 3 little babies. And one day I saw 2 grown-ups and only 2 babies. And I thought, what happened to the other baby? And then I realized it was just one of the babies had already gotten its adult like plumage. So it was really fun kind of watching that experience and watching the mom like dig down to get the little worm out of the ground, and then she'd hop over to her baby and stick it in its little mouth. So I really enjoyed that. So I'm kind of hopeful that I get to see that again this year, spring.
I'll take it back to frogs. I love hearing spring peepers come out. That's like for me the first sign of spring is they're often like those first calls like in the night or in the morning, and it's just my favorite sound. So it's just like little bursts of a high-pitched little note, and it's very cozy for me. It reminds me of like cool summer nights. So definitely one of my favorite things that will hopefully be coming around shortly.
All right, well, thank you all. We're out of time for today. So wave goodbye, say your goodbyes.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
All right, and thank you all so much. We had a ton of amazing questions today. So thank you all for participating and being a part of this. If you enjoyed today's program, you can support the museum by visiting engage.mos.org/welcome. And if you would like to see all of our virtual offerings, either our live shows, our town halls, our podcast, you can visit that at mos.org/mos@home. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.